Such
Yeah.
an attention whore. I'm sorry. That's a bad way to start the recording. How about I go? You want to start it?
Conversation about SE.
Yes.
Well, I've been thinking about like analogies and stuff, and how good is it to use analogies or what's another word for it? Those hypotheticals.
Okay.
And I find it kind of, and another thing I'd like to talk about is falsifiability and how to do, we did that in one talk before, but
Yeah,
yeah,
we
the
did a while back.
hypotheticals and analogies and kind of like what the difference of those are and when are they effective and when are they like not effective, when are
Okay.
they in fact kind of.
I guess I should also preface anything that I say is really just like my own really small
Yeah.
personal opinion. I would recommend, even if I say something that sounds really good, take it with a grain of salt and get some other people in there to like, I don't want a carbon copy of me. I want you to like take the best things of what I'm saying, take the best things of someone else and like make your own thing. Like,
Sure,
here are
I
some
appreciate
cool
that.
ingredients. Yeah.
But I also feel to be able to understand what you're coming with effectively, I really need to get into it and really understand it in order to then be able to kind of like question it and find my own kind of style of doing it, if you know what I mean.
You want to then like maybe get to the foundation of where I'm coming from, and then maybe we can work from there, and I'll throw in where I come in. If I explain my base, where I'm coming with regard to falsifiability and analogies probably would make more sense.
Okay.
My position, both religiously, spiritually, philosophical, all that stuff, scientifically, all that stuff is, I don't know. And I think I don't know is a really good place to start because one, it's a position that I can be really confident in. I know that I don't know something. I can test that. You can put me in MRI. You can give me a test. I can fail it over and over again. It's like, look, I don't know this. And like, I can't demonstrate knowledge if I don't have it. And I'm aware that I don't have it. And I can test that I don't have it. So I can be very, very, very confident. And I'm beginning to think I can be 100% confident in this, like absolutely confident that I don't know something. And if my position is I don't know, it's not an end point. Like I can still go through efforts to learn things, but I just feel like I don't know is like the most unbiased position to come to knowledge. When I say I kind of know something and I'm making claims and I'm trying to learn something, that might color my perspective of it. But if I say I don't know, but I'm trying to learn this, that's a really good angle for me to come from. It's also a position where I don't need to accept any burden of evidence because I've already can demonstrate that I don't know it. And I should be authority of what I know and what I don't know. So if I come to the conversation with someone who does know something, in my perspective, we both started from the same place of I don't know, but they became convinced that they did know something. So all I'm trying to find out is what is the process that they use to learn that thing? What convinced them? And is that thing that convinced them reliable? Not the conclusion. Like the conclusion might actually be true, but in order for me to be convinced that they're right, I have to see a reliable path towards there. So you talked about analogies. One I've been working on for a while is the coin flip analogy. Oh, excuse me. I just woke up. My voice is cracking left and right. So like if I had a coin, right, and I flipped it, I don't know what kind of Swedish coins. Kronor. Do you use kronor or euros in Finland?
We use euros.
Okay, so if I had a euro, do they have heads and tails?
They have like.
They got like a globe on one side and
they've got
like
Europe on one side, and then they've got the. Wait a second, Bobby. I haven't looked at those forever.
Do you call them heads and tails of the two sides?
I bet we do because I mean we do the heads and tails things.
Okay, cool. So you have
I know what you're talking about.
So you have a euro that has a heads and tails.
Yeah.
You flip it, you catch it. Now it's on the back of my hand. It's not on its side. It can only be one of two things, heads or tails, right? So at this point, I don't know if it's heads or tails. And I normally ask the person I'm talking to if they know it's heads or tails. They'll say they don't know either. And now we're both in a position where we don't know if it's heads or tails. So at this point, I could flip 1,000 other coins. I could do a lot of scientific examples and show, okay, we flipped a bazillion other coins scientifically in the same environment, and we got a 50-50. Like 50 of them were heads, 50 were tails. That's inconclusive for me to figure out if this coin is heads or tails. So at this point, you know, I don't have science to give me conclusive evidence, and I don't know it, and I know I don't know it, and it doesn't look like anyone else around me knows. So at this point, when I don't have enough conclusive evidence to come to a conclusion, I don't know, just that isn't just an option. It's actually the best answer to give. And I think in a lot of with regard to intellectual honesty, I don't know is probably the best position to come from with regards to answering something that you don't have conclusive evidence for. And it's totally fine, because I totally could find out just by, you know, revealing my hand. That's totally fine. But if someone comes to me and says, I know that's heads, I know this coin's heads, and I ask them, well, how'd you know it? They're like, well, I have a deep and personal relationship with coins that are heads up. I'm like, I don't know if that's convincing for this. That's how I take a lot of like the perspective of people who claim to know something that's like supernatural, or claim to know that something in history happened, or claim to know what they did yesterday. Like, I will be happy to believe them when I have a reliable way to understand how they got there. And the standard that I would need for me to believe them might be different based on what they say. If they tell me, hey, Tyrone, I ate some licorice and pizza yesterday, I'm like, yeah, I ate licorice and pizza too. Rock on, let's go. Licorice and pizza, it's a good meal. That's basically all I need, because that's a mundane claim for me. We have licorice, we have pizza, people eat them. It's not a big deal. But if someone said, hey, listen, I ate a fourth planet in the solar system and it blew up as a supernova in my belly, and then I flew to space on an intergalactic turtle and I met Iron Man, I'm like, well, hold up. You're fundamentally, if you're trying to tell me you're serious, you're telling me things that are fundamentally different from how I understand reality. And you're going to need a lot more evidence to back up what you're saying, rather than just a little story, because I'm going to need, you know, facts about the universe that I don't understand. I'm going to need some planetary evidence. I'm going to need, you know, evidence that Iron Man's a real guy. All these things add up. So for a supernatural claim, that's such a monumental expression. It's such an awesome thing to say, literally awesome. It like inspires awe in me to say, hey, there's a guy who is a god, or there's a guy who's a son of a god, or there's a being that created the universe. These things need more evidence than a book or a feeling or, you know, personal motivation, or it makes me feel a better person for me to come to the conclusion that they're true. I'm still at the position where I don't know. Doesn't mean that they're wrong. It just means that I've not been given the evidence yet to come to a conclusive conclusion that they're right.
Yeah.
What do you think about that so far?
Oh, complete crystal clear. Like you're basically verbalizing what I think.
Okay.
When I can think clearly. It's not that I wouldn't be able to get mixed up on that, and that somebody could trip me up on whether I really think that or not. But yeah, that's how I think when I think clearly, especially with the I don't know position.
So with regard to the last conversation that you had, there was a lot of times where, because I've been doing this enough, maybe only for really a couple of years, to be honest with you. I only became like an atheist when I was in my last year of like grad school, I think. That's when I literally switched when I went to Sweden, like in 2015 or so. So like, it's really only been about 3 years or so.
All right.
But the thing that I realized is that when you're having these engagements with people who do believe in a God, you need to have a means of talking to them that keeps you from adopting a burden of proof, because your position is I don't know, which you have all the proof you need to say that. Like, you are you know what you know, you can demonstrate that you don't know it, you're done. That's a mundane thing to say, that I don't know something. They're saying I do know something and I have evidence to support it. That's your route that's from your position of I don't know. You need to ask those questions to get there, without saying, well, how do you know it's not like this? Because now you've adopted the burden of proof. And from their position, they are saying, well, I'll just knock down your argument and I'll be right by default. And that's not how it's a good way to understand things. So like if someone said, Linda, why are you an atheist? What do you say? Or how would you take that?
Oh, why am I an atheist? Because theists exist.
What? I don't understand that. Could you swear? I'm sorry. I don't understand that. Because there are theists who exist because theists exist. So I don't understand.
Or because theism exists. I view it as a response to theism. Without theism, I would have no need to label myself as atheist. It would be just bizarre.
So it's like that was more of a semantical question. You're right. I meant more like, why don't you believe in a God?
Oh, why don't I believe in a God? I don't know what people mean by God, and I haven't found evidence for the propositions or the definitions of God that have been presented to me.
And if they said that's not a good reason not to believe in a God,
well, why is it not? Like, how can I make myself believe?
I think the better. I think
not so much a choice, really. I think for me.
I think you're answering those really well. I think though the point that I wanted to bring out is that you don't need to have a reason not to believe something. You need to have a reason to believe something.
Yeah.
So normally when I get that question or a variant of that question thrown to me, it's like, why aren't you an atheist? Or why don't you believe in a God? Or what's your proof that a God doesn't exist? I immediately stop that kind of line of questioning just to illustrate that. My point is, I don't know. I don't have a position on whether that God exists or doesn't exist. I am looking for evidence to come to a conclusion. And right now, I don't know is the best position to have because I don't have conclusive evidence either way. You're saying that you do know, or you're saying that you don't know. I've talked to both people. I've been kicked out of an atheist meetup group once for calling people out for not believing in God to like 100%. I'm like, how do you know that there is no God? And then they were like, you must be a secret theist who came to our organization. They kicked me out. I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. But I say, if you have a belief that you are very, very confident in, there must be some sort of reasoning behind that. If I don't have that belief, I don't need to have a reasoning behind it. I don't know is the default position. We call that the null hypothesis. Are you familiar with that? Or have you ever heard anyone say that before?
I've heard that. I've looked it up. I've read about it. When you say it like that, everything you said before null hypothesis, I'm like, yes, I completely agree. I completely get it. But then I go like, null hypothesis. What does it mean? I have this problem where I think I kind of like get stuff and then I need to use it myself. I guess it's kind of like language.
Sure,
in where you understand it first, but it's hard to construct sentences, understand like where your thoughts are being conveyed appropriately. And I feel that's where I am with all of this language and critical thinking and being able to express it, is I can identify it and understand it, but I can't really always. Like when I try to construct those sentences and make those points myself, I go like, wait, that wasn't exactly it.
Sure.
And then I have to go back and go like, what did I do wrong? And why can't I express it? Like, so something isn't completely clear.
I'll say in your benefit, you have like 3 languages going on that you're balancing in your head right now. And that's really impressive. I wonder if like the context of words, I think it's obvious that it does, but like the context of words that you use change in the language that you use them in. Is that accurate?
Sometimes, yeah, a little bit. But then also I do feel like I am linguistically kind of muddled. So I kind of like take stuff, like I can say phrases that we don't have in Swedish, but I say them in an English way because I learnt them when I was a kid. So for example, just to give an example of that, in English we say that we blow our nose when we take a piece of paper and empty it of its contents. And in Swedish, we say that we snuta näsan. There is an actual word for when you empty your nose, and it doesn't mean blow. It's not like wind blowing,
Sure.
That. But I have a tendency to sometimes say, when I'm not really thinking about it, I say blåsa min näsa, which would mean like.
I get it. You're blowing your nose, but you use, I guess, English terms to borrow into it.
And Swedish people will then react to that and go like, what do you do with your nose? And so I think I can kind of take certain meanings and stuff onto.
I'm sorry to go on a tangent, but this isn't exactly what you're dealing with, but I have gone to like Swedish grocery stores and I'll be like, man, I need this item, but I don't know the name for it in Swedish. So I'll just say it in English with a really heavy Swedish accent and see if I get close enough. And so I'll be like, they'll be like, du behöver hjälp? And I'll be like, ja. yeah, velvet, aluminum foil, and they'll be like, oh yeah, aluminum foil, and they'll bring me a box that says aluminum foil in it, and I'm like, yeah, ooh, that's a freebie. I got foil today. So it happens all the time. It happens all the time.
But actually, what my point now was that I don't know if my trilingualism is making SE that much harder for me.
I think it's an advantage.
Yeah. But my point was like I was doing an analogy between how effective I am at expressing my my points.
Sure, I understand. I think challenges make you stronger regardless of what they are. And I think you're going to end out of this with probably some of the best SE in the entire movement. You will.
Then it will be worth it.
So I have my background's in science. I have like a career where I go around and I talk to people about scientific terms, and I like to condense really complicated things into like analogies that are simple. And I'm finding it's really useful in SE as well. For the null hypothesis, and I'm working on my analogies too. I think it's an ever-evolving process. But like right now I have a pot in my kitchen. That pot that I have is either full or it's empty. Can we, like, full or not full, basically? Can we agree that it has to be one of those two things? Are you familiar with like logical absolutes, non-excluded middle, things like that? Okay, so that pot that I have in my kitchen is either full or not full, right? Which one is it?
I don't know.
That's the null hypothesis. So that's the correct answer because you don't have enough information to make an assessment. So I gave you a situation where only two possible answers were available, or really two possible states were available: a full pot or a not full pot. There's no middle ground there. It's either full or it's not full.
And my answer is the null hypothesis.
Your answer is the null hypothesis. I don't know if it's either one or the other. And that is a valid answer to give because you didn't come to the situation understanding that it's full and then it was emptied, and then it was full. You're saying, I don't have enough information to come to an answer either way. I'm null on the position. Null. I don't have a position.
Can I try out an analogy on you or
rock it out. Go for it.
That I've been working or that just came to mind one day.
Yeah,
when I was and I think it is the null hypothesis, but I'm not sure. So, and it's kind of, I guess, like a thought experiment thing. No,
cool.
I don't know if I'm using that right. Analogy, thought experiment. Yeah, because I don't really know what it's talking about. But yeah, actually, I came to think about this when I was speaking to a lady who thinks it's really obvious that God exists, kind of like it's the default kind of thing. And then she was asking me kind of like the whole like how come you are not why don't you, I guess it's like, why don't you believe then? Because it's so obvious.
I'm trying to catch up.
Well, anyway, I'll just do the analogy and then I'll try and figure out what it actually possibly conveys. Okay, so there's this problem, like, how can I know whether I have a step brother or sister, or not step, that would be in law or something, but just that I have a half brother or sister that I don't know of.
Okay.
Like, can I prove that? Oh, this comes with like the proving the negative thing that
it's kind of weird.
Gotten in my face several times, and when I try to explain why I can't prove a negative, because that's what people ask too. They go like, well, why can't you prove it? And this was the best thing I came up with. Like, if I had somebody asked me to prove that I have not got a half brother or sister, that would be virtually like impossible, because I cannot account for all my father's semen throughout his life and where it went. I can kind of like interview my parents and come to a high level of confidence that they decided that they wanted these two kids, but I cannot know whether my mother possibly miscarried at one point and she doesn't want to talk about it because it's a sensitive
this is really complicated
subject.
Yeah. This is really complicated.
But like, there's no way I could be able to, even though it makes sense to me that me and my brother are the only siblings in our family. I cannot know at 100% that I do not have a brother or sister. Also, because my mother could possibly get pregnant and miscarry a child without knowing it.
Can I throw something out?
Yep.
The hallmark of design. Have you ever heard me talk about that before? When you're trying to design something, it's particularly like an analogy. You'll see, you'll find out that like
simple is better.
Simple is better. Yeah.
I have heard you speak about this.
Okay. So right now you have an analogy. So we threw out 2 analogies so far. I had one where there was a pot in my kitchen. Done. Like it's either full or it's not full. Right. And then the analogy that you have is step siblings, the promiscuity of your father, the allocation of sperm over many generations, miscarriages, family things that are like maybe really sensitive at the moment. I feel like the more simple you can get that example, the better it is. And you don't have to necessarily use mine, but the hallmark of a good example, particularly when you're trying to explain a complicated thing, is a much more simpler example.
Right.
Yeah. And that's why I like the coin flip analogy. It's like, is it heads or tails? I don't know. There's your null hypothesis right there again. Like, I don't know it's a position because I don't have a position that it's heads and I don't have a position that it's tails. Am I saying I don't know? I'm not saying it's either one. I'm saying here's this option that I have that's actually the best option until I have better evidence.
Okay, so if somebody is asking me then to prove that it is either or, it's kind of like I haven't gotten that far.
Right? I don't know. Do you have a position? So typically if you're confronted with that position, honestly, you can honestly say that you don't know, and you actually think that I don't know is the best answer for that position. And if they supplement that with, well, here's what it actually is, then what you should say is, I don't know, but I'm interested in hearing what you have to say. Let's talk about your method, because my position is I don't know, and I think that's the best answer so far. And I haven't had a person disagree with me that I don't know. They actually accept that as an invitation for them to start pronouncing what they believe. And now they have the burden again. And now we can talk about their burden and basically focus on their methodology, not mine, because I don't have a methodology to get anywhere. I'm already at the base position of I don't know.
Right.
I'm at a valid.
And if somebody would say to me, like, I'm not going to listen to you unless you explain to me why you cannot prove a negative, is that like, well, then we're not going to be able to continue? Or how do I continue?
Well, again, you don't have to have the conversation. A conversation takes 2 people. And as soon as someone says, I'm not listening to you, they've already assessed that they're not having a conversation with you. And there's really nothing you can do about that. So, thank you for your time. That's basically the things. Like when you're I'm willing to have a conversation where we both can listen to each other. And if that's not what you're interested in, that's totally fine with me. We can talk again later if you're willing to have that.
This is so cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Let's talk. Can we get into let's see, that YouTube interview that you had with Dean Meadows?
Okay. Which one?
I'm sorry, the latest one that you just had.
Yeah, I just I had the chance this morning to go because I'm really slow with all this studying stuff, because I noticed if I go too fast.
What are you studying?
Then no,
what are you studying?
Myself.
Oh, okay.
So this is called Studying with Tyrone.
Oh, cool. I got my own page.
And I went through your feedback and wrote down everything that I wanted to take. I write notes to basically think through the feedback.
Do you want to go over it all right now?
What did you want to do with that? Yeah,
let's like in the first 2 minutes of the conversation, I know you guys had some conversations before, so I felt like maybe I was missing a little steps. Maybe you went into it in more detail later on, but you brought up the topic of let's talk about the resurrection, and he was like, yeah, I'm totally going to talk about the resurrection. And then he started making claims, but the thing was, typically when you have an SE talk about a particular claim, before I throw out the confidence scale, I like to try to get as specific as possible about the claim as I can. There's 2 reasons because of that. One, when you have a very vague topic, like if someone says, well, I don't believe in a God, but I'm spiritual, that you have such this cloud that you're trying to like understand. And there's a very good chance that the person you're talking to doesn't understand it either. And when you start getting to like some really targeted questions, they'll just shift the goalposts. They'll like start talking about something else that's within that cloud, and they'll wiggle out of your line of reasoning. And that's not good for either party.
Get out of the cloud.
Yeah. So when they say like, oh, I'm sorry, go on ahead. You want to start?
No,
go for
just
it.
that I realized that in the moment that I went past that too fast. And thing is that we had spoken about that before, and I know that it's the Christian God and it's the Bible, that the scriptures that he's referring to and all that, but
I never saw it.
Of course, I know, and nobody else had either. So, and I'm doing this for the benefit of the viewer and not just for myself, although I do realize that I'm at the point where this is a lot to do with me learning. But it's always for the benefit of the viewer too, for somebody else learning SE, or just anybody who comes along who wants to learn something from that conversation. So for that,
so like if you do this again,
specific thing in me, Bobby. Yeah.
You can recap. This is what we talked about in the past between myself and the person I was talking to.
Yeah. Exactly. To have everybody in the conversation.
Yeah. I think also if he's resurrection, there's a lot of different versions of the resurrection, even in the Bible. If I brought you one Bible, there's at least two different versions of the resurrection. Some that say that Jesus was buried in like an open place, burial ground. Some that say he was buried where there was a stone that was rolled in front, that was rolled away, that Mary Magdalene saw. There was accounts where everything like had an earthquake when he died, and there was things that ripped apart like when he died. Others that just had him die and that was it, and they took his body away. There's like, you should never get caught up in those details, because it's not your onus to bring the details. It's the person who says that the resurrection happened to have the details. And so what you should say, or at least what I would maybe a path to take in the future would be like, what do you mean by resurrection? Like, don't assume that you know what he's talking about. Just say, what do you mean when you say that? Just to give him the chance to get a very specific, detailed example of it. And if he says, well, just generally the resurrection, just generally, ask him which specific version is he referencing as the most, or presenting as the most accurate retelling of that story. Because then that gets him onto the, okay, well, I am aware that there's conflicts with narratives, but this is the one that I think is the best one. And if you can't get to there, just the idea that he's thinking that there's narratives that he can follow and narratives that he can't is enough to have that good thinking SC conversation.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think what I did before that was I spent too much time on the what. Like went to, without even really being good at asking in my IP to be very specific. We just went down this rabbit hole of not being able to, not me being able to understand what they were saying, just as a claim, like not being able to focus in on a claim.
Right.
So I can also go like the wrong way with that. But of course, you would have to break down me
I'll
doing
say
that.
At the time that everything that you're doing in SE is perfect with regards to like managing a conversation, being a kind host, being respectful, having people want to talk to you longer. Like this is even already great for me. So like this is you've mastered the hardest part of SE, which is the social aspect. I can't tell you, I've had conversations before with people who know what like methodologies are and talk about them, but have no personable aspects that make me want to continue talking to them. And that is the much harder mountain to climb. Absolutely. Than knowing what question to ask and when to ask it. So like we're just fine-tuning things, if anything. And I think your path ahead is great. Quick thing, this is the easy fix. I hope this is an easy fix. But the confidence scale that you throw out is like 1 to 100. 1 to 100, the lowest number that I can give is still a 1, and that might not even reflect how I'm really confident or how little confidence I have in something. I think 0 to 100 is a better example. It's just an easier two states to understand, nothing all. If I was 1% confident about something, in my mind, that doesn't even seem like I'm completely confident that it's not the case. It still sounds like I'm a little bit confident. It's like a Christian coming up to you and being like, how confident are you or that Jesus is the Son of God? Between 98 and 100.
Yeah.
Let's see. Also, his main argument is that I believe in the resurrection just as much as American history. Did you catch that?
I did.
Okay.
And if he wouldn't have wanted to put himself on the scale, I would have said that that's not accurate. But because he went on the scale, I kind of thought that he wasn't bringing the history thing along with it. So I made a misjudgment in the situation.
I'm really quick to abandon the scale. Like if I see some resistance up against it, I'm willing to throw it out completely.
Yeah.
I look at a lot of other things to give me an impression of how confident someone is, like their body language or like just the way they're expressing themselves. I had a conversation with a guy named Tim. I don't think he wanted to give me a specific number. Maybe he did, but like I asked him how confident he was, and he said pretty confident, but he was kind of just kind of like closed to the position. His like arms are closed and he's kind of like leaning forward and he's like, no, I'm pretty confident, like pretty quiet about it. And by the end, he's like, well, yeah, I'm 90%, but I think he said 90%. Yeah, I'm 90%, but that's basically, I don't know, right? Like he was way more open, and I think he was more accepting of the idea that it's okay not to know something, even if you claim a high confidence in it. So like that is progress, even like in a short chat. So like if someone gives resistance to a confidence skill, throw it out. He said pretty confident, he said upper 90s. Good. But my issue is the equivocation of American history with like supernatural claims.
Yeah. And that's what I need to work on now. Like how do I put light on that?
Yeah. So
in a good way.
I think you come from a really cool perspective because it doesn't sound like you have like a religious upbringing. Is that accurate?
Yeah, true.
Okay, so like the things that I hear and make me go, he's doing the thing again, because I've heard it all my life. And I've even been ones to like preach those kinds of things to other people. And I'm like, I can't believe I said those things. So I have like a really, really long relationship with like these fallacies.
Yeah.
So when I hear someone else say them, they pop out to me really fast. But I think you're generally hearing them for like, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. Rather than like, oh, that's BS. I need to take this thing down. Let me start working on a question to ask. Blop. And then destruction.
It's interesting to hear you describe it like that, because I do often when I watch like the Atheist Experience or other things online, and people just go like, oh, it's a fallacy, blah, blah, blah. And I've got these fallacy cards here that I've just gotten that I'm starting to study. Where did I put my cards here? I kind of go like,
Can I see them?
Yeah, like these guys.
Are those from that website? Yeah, they are. You've seen that? Okay, that's awesome.
Sort of.
I got similar things. Okay, yeah, cool. Not cool. Yeah, that's cool.
The straw man and all that. And there are some that I find are really clear and that I have, I guess, pretty organically figured out for myself, maybe, or with help of people, reasonable people in my environment, through my upbringing. But then there are others where I go like, but how so? How do we know that that's absolutely logically understand? Like I need, like I just, I haven't completely
internalized them.
Yeah, all of these to where I'm sure that I'm identifying it. Like, has he actually made that fallacy, and that I actually understand why it is, why it makes what he is saying incorrect? Because maybe you can just make fallacies and still be.
How about this? Think about his claim as an equivalent to the coin flip example. So like you and Dean Meadows both flipped the coin, caught it, you put it on the back of the hand. You don't know if it's heads or tails. He doesn't know that it's heads or tails. But later on, he became convinced that it was heads. Yeah. And so you ask him, how did you know this was heads? And he tells you, well, I read a lot of American history books. Yeah. And that's how I know that it's heads. And you're like, I don't know if that's the best way to know that that coin that we have in front of us is heads or tails. How does reading an American history book tell you what this coin is? If he says, and so that's like an equivocation fallacy. He's using, like a historical sense of one thing to explain something completely different.
Right.
Well, the coin was flipped in the past, and I'm reading some books that were about the past. Therefore, that gives me enough information to like tell you what that coin is, heads or tails. Yeah. But there's not enough information in those books to validate if this is a heads or tails coin flip.
Yeah.
Same thing especially for a supernatural claim, which requires a lot more evidence or a higher standard, in my opinion.
I totally get that.
I also would say if he said, hey, I have an authority that's really, really smart about coin flips, and he told me that it was tails over the phone. It's like, well, your authority doesn't really matter here. Like, we have a coin that could be heads or tails. Your authority might be wrong. I don't know how. He might be an expert on coin flips, true, but I don't know if his information is really going to persuade me to tell me that I have a reliable way to tell me what this coin is. I'm not trying to get right. I'm not, with the coin flip thing, I'm not trying to be right. I'm just trying to have a reliable method to get to the right answer. So the conclusion might be that it's actually tails, and if I guess it, I'll be right. But that's not a reliable method to like figure out things. So you got to think about the process or the path the guy's using to get to the conclusion, whether he's using a method or not, whether he's using some sort of understanding. And if he's saying history books is what I use to confirm the Bible, those are two very different things. The difference being in that history books describe mundane things, typically American War, Civil Wars, things like that. The holy book that he's referring to has, as he mentioned, a resurrection in it of a guy who was killed publicly, put in a tomb for 3 days in Mesopotamian era idea of like germ theory and all that stuff, and was brought back totally fine, and then I guess disappeared into like heaven in like a beam of light or whatever. That is a incredible claim. And you need more than one history book or even his holy book. Even those two things combined are not enough to substantiate that claim. You need more evidence for that. Just like a coin flip, like, hey, I read a history book that tells me what this is. Like, that's not enough. You're going to need to like show me an x-ray. You're going to need to show me like some really cool thing. You're going to have to pry my hands off of it, things like that. Is the evidence he's presenting suitable to believe the thing that you're working with? And I think when I think about stuff in that kind of an analogy way, analogistic sense, I don't want to use new words, but it makes what fallacy he's using a lot more clear to me.
Yeah.
It's like, you're claiming the supernatural thing happened. How did you get to your confidence if we both didn't know at a certain point? What method were you using? And is that method reliable? That's what I'm talking about.
I get that.
Does that make more sense? So you can read those cards. I can guarantee you, if you ever say, here's the fallacy that you're committing, and you throw out the card, that'll never work in a conversation.
Yeah, no.
They'll never like it. But it's good for you to be able to recognize which ones. Maybe it'll help you figure out what kind of question you need to ask next. And I think maybe like a good example in that sense, I'd be like, I have a dog, right? Would you believe me if I have a dog? If I just said I had a dog? It's like, yeah, maybe. People have dogs. It's not that big of a deal. It's like, if I showed you a picture of a dog, would you believe it that like I had in my house? Like, yeah, I would say that's your dog. But if I said I have a purple magical dragon, right? Do you believe me? It's like, most people aren't going to believe you. And even if you show them a picture of a purple magical dragon, they're not, I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry. They aren't going to believe you. They aren't going to believe you. So you need more evidence to support more extraordinary claims. And as a result, if he doesn't have extraordinary evidence, there's no reason for you to be convinced and that of his extraordinary claim. And that should have been like the real angle of that conversation. The details of what he believes aren't important. It's that method. The details are all his conclusion. And here he is saying them, but that method is what's really the thing you should be targeting. And I think in the conversation you had with them, you're really targeting like the conclusion and maybe asking some like classical apologetics or counter apologetics that kind of missed this really bigger issue.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of going for, how did you conclude that the Bible was reliable? Because that's what he keeps on saying, is that's his evidence.
Yeah, even if it was really reliable, if it's not reliable through the whole thing, and there's like one thing that's wrong, there's no guarantee that the resurrection is the reliable thing. How do I put it? If he's pointing at multiple different books and he's saying, well, John's gospel is spotty, like it doesn't have the sermons that Jesus gave, but if we look in Luke, then it has the things that John must have heard. So you can combine those two things. Like he was starting to do these things where he was like piecing together spotty anecdotal evidence. And I'm like, if the standard of evidence that you have is not complete, if it's not like absolute and complete, and it has to be inspired by man and all that stuff, is there a possibility that some stories are just, and it's some, I think he said in a metaphor, some stories are metaphorical in a sense. Well, if that's the case, what method is he using to determine what's metaphor and what's not, and how does he apply that to, like, you know, the resurrection? But at that point, you're already sinking knee deep into like the swamp of details that he spent his entire life understanding.
How do I get out of that swamp? That's what I'm not getting.
Don't, in my opinion, never get into the details of what he's talking about. Just stay on that upper level epistemology. Just say, hey, okay, so you're convinced that that's true. Like, you can wrap it all up. It's like, okay, so Jesus's gospels, resurrection, these anecdotal evidence from the Bible, you're convinced that that's true. Why? And how does that relate to the conclusion that you have being true? Like, here's all the things that you're saying. How does that relate to a true claim?
When he keeps on repeating that it's in the Bible, it's in the gospel, it's in these different verses that he brings up, what do I then do?
Okay. He seemed like a really, really nice guy. And I think you have a really good conversational tone with him too. So I think he would answer the question as honestly as possible, at least from my impression of you, from talking to you. And I would, instead of challenging the Bible by asking him, well, what makes you think the Bible's true? Because that's going to trigger a very specific set of claims for him. Right. Ask him something that's unrelated, but that's analogous to the situation. The situation that's at heart right now is, I believe this book that has supernatural claims in it. And I think those supernatural claims actually happened. And here's my evidence to support those supernatural claims. And you can say in your head, without out loud, but saying, that's not enough evidence to support a supernatural claim. That's the problem that I see. So what kind of questions can I ask to highlight the idea that you need more evidence to support a supernatural claim than not? And that's when I throw out the dog examples. Like, can I throw an example out at you? So if I said I had a pet cat, would you believe me? Especially if I showed you the cat that I have, would you believe this is my pet? And you'd be like, yeah, sure. Okay. If I said I had a spaceship, would you believe me? It's like, no. Well, what if I had a card that had a picture of me standing next to a spaceship? Would that make you believe me? Would you be more confident if that was the case?
So isn't it in that point, more than investigating his epistemology, I'm kind of I'm questioning, I'm kind of highlighting why I can't believe it? Is that what I'm doing?
You have to recognize where the fallacy that he made was, to an extent, because you are trying to have an honest conversation with him where you're learning stuff too. That's why I'm saying the epistemology that you're doing is totally fine. And this is just an angle that I would take. But if I recognize a fallacy that someone's using, I don't immediately confront them with the fallacy, because that's going to be like attacking the person. And I'm not trying to attack the person or the conclusion. I'm trying to highlight a method. So what I'll throw out is, okay, you believe this. In my head, I'm saying, you believe this, but for not enough evidence. I'm going to throw you an example out to you that's a bit more mundane and a little bit off related. And we'll just work through the steps to see, do you understand what I'm saying when you say, no, I don't believe you when you say you have a spaceship? Could you understand when I say, well, I don't believe the Bible when it says a God came to earth as a human form and died for all of our sins? Like, do you see how they're both require more evidence than just one book or like one picture? Like, that's an extraordinary claim that requires more evidence. And they should be able to come. Oh, go for it.
That you wouldn't say that out loud either. Like all that stuff. Like, can you understand why I'm struggling to understand?
Yeah, because
I just have to say this out loud for myself, because I feel the urge of saying that, like, what my problem is.
Normally, if you have a good confidence scale set up at the beginning, and again, it's not mandatory, but you go through the questions where they recognize what's probably not enough evidence. And if you can get like a really good, if I have the same conversational tone that I had with that I'm having with you and that you had with Dean Meadows, I would be happy saying, well, this is why I'm not following it along. My position is, I don't know. Like, I'll probably do the coin flip at the end of the conversation, be like, well, I don't know, but like, I would need more evidence than just one book to say that this was heads or tails. And I guess that's why I'm coming to you, because the idea that a God exists is a lot more incredible than just this coin flip. And I wouldn't believe this coin flip with just a book, or like 4 people saying that was the case, 2,000 years ago. So maybe we just need better evidence. What do you think about that? Like, open-ended questions. Those are great things.
I love that. And I like the coin flip at the end, because I was contemplating doing those like thought exercises in the beginning with Dean, but I really do honestly believe that he would feel that I would be patronizing him if I would bring out the whole Ferrari thing in the beginning of a conversation.
Yeah.
Like, he would be like, oh, sorry, I was about to say something really rude, but like, piss off. Like, this is...
man! You guys are fighting.
and I don't
No,
want to do that. I don't want to go like, well, Teen, have you ever thought of, and I honestly think that would be kind of patronizing. But the coin flip thing at the end, when I'm explaining my own limitations to be able to accept the these historical claims as evidence for supernatural phenomena, that I can go like, I can be all excited about that at that point.
Right. I understand. I'm thinking like it's good to have some pocket examples that are inherently not patronizing, but anything can be patronizing based on the tone that you have. Like there's like there's this guy on YouTube who has like a very patronizing tone of voice, and I can't watch any of his videos, but he makes good content. So like if he does like let's plays and stuff like that, and he's like, now I'm going to get the power up. The power up powers you up. It's really powerful. I'm like, oh my gosh, stop talking. Just get the thing. Just keep moving. But I think if you are using a good tone, even things that you think in your head are patronizing are expressed in a non-patronizing manner. And I think it's totally fine to just say, can we take a step back, and can I just try to get a better idea of this by asking like a couple of questions? They might seem like random, but I'm trying to like get a better understanding. I'm generally trying to understand, and I really appreciate the time that you're giving me. So like, if I had a dog, you would believe me that I have a dog if I just showed you a picture of the dog, right? It's like, yeah, sure. Okay, well, if I said I had like, a time machine that I got from the Gap, would you believe that if I showed you a picture of the time machine? It's like, probably not. Like, could you understand then that a lot more evidence is needed to explain blah, blah, blah? I do it like, just like that, just like a nice, simple tone. I think you could totally have those kinds of talks with someone.
Yeah, it's so cool. Thank you so much for giving those like real examples. Like I'm one of those kind of, I guess, I learned by seeing somebody else do it to really kind of have an idea of how I would do it, or then really understand it. Well, different things I learn in different ways, but yeah, but I really appreciate the examples.
Exactly. Let's see. What do we have other here? Bank robberies are a mundane claim. He used bank robberies as a means to explain why he believed in like a god. Like there's these bank robberies, and we can have like a criminal investigation to figure out who robbed the bank by asking different people. We did the same thing with them in the Bible. They asked different people, and that proved that a God existed. I'm like, these are, again, you're using the same standard of evidence that you would use to explain something simple to explain something really extraordinary. And you would need a higher standard of proof to explain that. So the questions that you may, it sounds like he already has examples to throw at you, but maybe you didn't have like good ones to throw back at him. But it's not a throwing example contest, really. But it's good to have them in your pocket to know this is the fundamental thing that I think you might be needing to improve in your reasoning for me to be convinced that you're telling the truth.
Yeah, but there also, I think I kind of misunderstood him, at least when I watched the replay or playback replay. Was that I thought that he was talking about how there are like different versions of the same thing being documented. Therefore, like a detective who takes different types of, like, I didn't really understand it to begin with, and I was confused, and I tried to get that clarified, but still was kind of like not really was not following, which happens a lot. But I kind of feel if I really take it down to my speed, it's like we're not going to get anywhere.
I think interviews are so hard to do, and I think your format is a lot more like an interview. I think my formats are a lot more like literally just talking to a random person and chatting. It was a conversational tone. Here in my house, it's like, oh man, I got mic'd up like I'm on Good Morning America or Svedria Doc. Like it's like Good Morning America, here we go. And so like I feel a bit more professional than I normally would, even though I just woke up and I'm wearing the clothes I slept in. But it's a lot more, I feel more on my guard than I do than if I was outside. But I think you have a really good way of lowering that down already. So the question isn't so much how do I become a better interviewer, because I think you're great already. It's just what kind of questions can I use to have a good influence in this conversation, so where I can let my point of view be heard as well, but not force it into someone else.
Yes. We've, by the way, almost done an hour now.
Okay. Do you want to go for 20 more minutes?
Respect your time. Yes, I have time.
Okay. Let me text my friend. We're gonna go hiking pretty soon. He hasn't texted me back. yo, you good for that time? Or do you want to meet later? Or are you busy?
And would you would you like to like give me a video for me to watch and give you like my feedback?
Yeah,
and I'll give it to you like next time.
Unfortunately, I hadn't posted it yet. It's not a good interview. I don't think the guy didn't want to sit down at the table, and he spent most of his time just preaching at me. And so I was really just trying to do my best to practice, what do you call it, interrupting in a positive way.
Oh yeah, that's
maybe
great.
That's something.
That's what I need to practice. I need to find people like that.
Unfortunately, I didn't do a very good job with it because I didn't follow up with any questions behind it. But I thought it would be good for maybe other people to see. And I just didn't like the interview, so I'm kind of been hesitating to render it. But positive interruptions, my idea of how I do it is Dean Meadows will give you 5 claims in one sentence or like in one paragraph of like text. He'll be like, I believe in Jesus because, he's the Son of God. It's been said the Bible is, written by God, inspired by man, and it's holy, perfect. And I take it literally. And this is why it's important to understand that there's different Bibles that say different things, but this one Bible is the one true one because I believe in it and I was raised in that way. And it has embarrassing stories in it, and that means that it's more true. And you can see 4 different people talking about it, and that makes everything always true 100% of the time. Don't worry about it. I'm right. And he just throws it at you, and you're like, what do I do with all these things that he just said? And how do I handle it? Like, how do you respond to something like that? So
totally.
Right? So I found that, I think Ben also told you this as well. Like, it's good to just say, okay, I'm going to wrap up everything you said in just like a couple of sentences. And then we're going to go right back to the point of the question, right? And it first requires you to identify what the point of the question is, which is, what method are you using to support a supernatural claim? Because that's the fundamental point of the resurrection stories. Like, that's a supernatural claim. You say you have a methodology to say that it's true. What is that method, and is that method reliable? So he throws all the things out at you, and you can say, okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, there was a guy named Jesus. He was talked about in a book that was viewed by multiple witnesses who wrote stories about him, and that you believe that this book was inspired by, being. How does any of that relate to the truth of the matter, or is that substantial evidence to support a supernatural claim? That's like the dry way of saying it. The more friendlier way of saying it would be, I hear all these things that you're saying about like maybe Jesus and stuff, and I'm just trying to understand, how does these evidences that you provided show that the resurrection was real? Could you show me a direct line? Like that forces him to do the heavy lifting for you, because when you just clarify that you're just trying to get a better idea of how it relates to the point of the conversation, 1, you just summarized everything that he just said in a quick wrap up. 2, you show that you're only interested in one point, which is, how does that point to the resurrection? That's the topic of the conversation. You brought it up. How do we get there? And 3, it makes him parse from his own bag of things that he gave you to tell you what the most important of them are. And then you have a more clearer line of what to talk about. So just be like, here's all these things that you said. I'm having trouble understanding how that relates to the point of the conversation. Could you show me how to get there with the things that you just told me?
Cool.
It's not a yes or no question either. It's an open-ended question.
Yeah.
You wrapped up, you're showing, hey, I'm listening to you. You said all these things. Here's the point of the conversation. What of those things that you told me relates to the point of the conversation? Yeah. And if he says like all of it, ask him for like specific examples of how he gets from that thing he said to there. And then once he starts throwing them one at a time, be willing to interject yourself and be like, okay, well, I understand what you're saying here. Even if you're interrupting just to repeat back something he said, that's a very, very good skill too, because you're interrupting him with his own words, which doesn't feel like an interruption. And I also would suggest never say interruption. Just say, can I repeat back what you said? I'm trying to catch up.
Right. Can I interrupt? Can I repeat back?
Never say interrupt. That makes people close up. No one likes being interrupted, but people love hearing what they just said and love teaching people. And they'll say like, oh yeah, sure, go on ahead. Then you rephrase what they just said, and most often they will correct what you just said, which is really their own words. I've had a conversation with a guy who was like, I believe pollution is destroying the world, and it's my generation that's at fault. And I'll be like, can I just rephrase what you said? So you said your generation's responsible for the pollution and it's destroying the world. He says, no, I didn't say that. I meant more like XYZ. Like he corrected himself just from hearing what he was saying. Yeah. And I think one of the best things about SE is it gives you busy writing paper as now. Still have another report to write up. So my friend, he won't be able to make it.
Oh,
So I'm good for a while then.
okay.
That's cool, dude. Hold up. That's cool, dude. Cool, dude. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think that was one of the coolest things that I wrote down. I highlighted it and everything. Was to how to. What was it you said? Wait. I have to find where I wrote down my. Or it was your thought, but then I kind of. If I give my IPs too much time to talk and not enough to think, like I put, like I have my goal is to help them think in the moment, which I haven't really reflected on, even though I said it, I think, to. Oh, well, anyway, I haven't really reflected on that what are my goals in that moment, and that one of those goals can be to actually allow for thinking in the moment.
What would you say is like your major goals with SE in a conversation? Like your top 3 goals.
Top 3 goals in SE conversations. Well, they are a bit different depending on who I'm talking to. With Dean, it is for myself to learn SE. Is the goal? Can that be a goal? Is that an honest answer?
Yeah.
With another lady that I've probably done most SE online in Twitter, in direct messages, it has been to understand how she believes.
Okay.
Is that my goal? Really? Is that honest, Linda? And it's been to. I do feel I have a goal there to just express. She seems a bit afraid of atheists, so just to show that I can be nice and loving. Like I don't have horns and stuff, because we do talk a lot of kind of just everyday stuff.
Would you say that as well? Your 3 goals are, you believe that you want to improve at the skill of SE, or like how you express yourself and talk to other people?
I do SE to become better at SE. Is that a circular motivation?
No, it's why I play guitar, I think that's totally fine. And then
and why I would want to be good at SE would be to help people reflect on what they believe if they haven't done so, or I believe that people don't really reflect on these things too.
Would you say that's more the foundation of that first goal that you have?
Facilitate the reflecting of it.
Would you say that's more of a foundation of that first goal that you have?
Oh yeah. Like that's why I want to get good at it.
Okay, so then just to refine the position, you want to help yourself and I guess the person that you're talking to reflect on their beliefs. Yes. Not only just why you want to get better at SE, but why they believe in the things that they believe.
Yeah, kind of like just loosen that knot of certainty.
Not bad. And then second goal, you want to understand why people believe things in general?
Yeah, so that I can help them loose the knot.
If they already had a good position.
Yeah. I feel less less motivated, but I've noticed that the more I do SE, the more the whole good position becomes a little bit fuzzy, and I think just practicing in having good conversation with people, just to actually conversate on the same subject. SE is good for that, so that we don't just like, this is my presentation and you're having your presentation and our thoughts don't really connect, or we're not getting each other, quite possibly, is what I've found as a phenomenon. So I would like to just have good conversations on all kinds of things where I actually learn. And
can we refine point 2, or maybe the foundation of point 2 is you just want to have good communication skills so that you can get 2 people to talk about the same thing? Okay.
And maybe even just to reflect and realize that, we might be disagreeing this like violently or aggressively because we're not actually like talking.
Sure. I think what the great thing about SE is you avoid those heated debates or arguments in the first place. So like, it's not just about conversational skills, but it's demonstrating a peaceful conversational method to have a good, pleasant conversation with a deeply held belief with someone where you're both talking about the same thing and not past each other.
And so my ultimate goal, my ultimate direction is
ultimate goal.
World peace.
World peace
is what I
You missed it. You missed it. South Korea and North Korea already shook hands. They already happened. We're all in the boat. Trump to thank for that. Thank you, Trump. Thank you, our president. Thank you, Trump. All right. I know, right? Anyway, the last goal that you said is you just want to put a good face for atheism, like with regard to talking to people. Is that accurate?
But that's kind of like dwindling, because I had that before where I felt quite slighted as somebody of non-belief, that would entail that I have this baggage of negative attributes that are not a part of who I am. But I think there is something positive to that too. But I don't know, because I'm kind of on the fence with that, because I also feel...
What's the opinion of atheism or atheists in Finland? I thought it was a pretty secular environment.
It's secular, but nobody really likes to shout out that they are atheist. It's kind of that thing like when I met my husband, for example, although he did write in his profile, we met online on a dating site, he did write atheist, and I was hugely impressed by that. And I was like, oh yeah, somebody who would actually, admit to it, and that leads me to assume that he knows what it means. And so that's really great. But when we then actually met, and I was like, and we started talking about atheism and stuff like that, and I've been more kind of had the activist streak in me. Yeah. He was just like, well, it doesn't really matter because it's just like an idiotic claim to begin with, like, who cares kind of thing. And so I think, yeah, in Finland, this is my opinion. I bet there are lots of different opinions, and it depends on where you are geographically in the country. Also, it changes a bit. But I would say that like atheists, people who have to say that they're atheists are kind of troublemakers. That whatever beliefs people do have in this country, whether they be like they like to do church things as a tradition, but they don't disbelieve in evolution, or they don't necessarily believe that God created the planet, but they like doing these tradition things, that they are free to do so. And if you go like, I'm atheist as your child is being christened in this traditional manner, is considered to be disruptive.
Oh, okay.
So atheists should therefore kind of like, they can be that, we might all be that, but we shouldn't say it out loud. We shouldn't upset each other in that way. And if you have a belief that is irrational, it is your freedom to have it.
Just so I can catch up then. So there's a perspective in Finland that people who are atheists tend to be troublemakers by the very fact that they pronounce their lack of belief, which others view as disruptive to traditional things. And even if they agree on the same positions, like, yeah, I don't believe it either, but I'm not making a fuss about it. Why are you making a fuss about it? Yes. Like, that's the general impression of it. Like, no one takes religion seriously enough to the point where anyone feels motivated to exclaim that they don't believe in religion. And if there was, the general, I guess, what would you say, implicit understanding is, well, we don't believe it either, so just shut up.
Yeah, kind of. And then there are different levels of, I guess, if you would dig deeper into that, there are people who are but I do believe in some type of energy or deity, possibly kind of fuzzy type. But of course, it's not the church.
Sure.
It's not the religion. The religion got it wrong, but there still is a high possibility that there is something.
With regard to your third point, would you say then that, like, it's not just about putting a good face on atheism, but to show that you can have these kinds of conversations representing atheism in a way that's not destructive or troublemaking or like, crazy or like offensive or disruptive?
Yeah, that my intentions are good.
Yeah, you can have.
And I actually think it's a virtue to think critically. I think it's a virtue to hold off on the certainty of God's existence.
Okay, cool. So I think we wrapped up something really awesome then.
Or an open mind kind of thing.
So you're recording this right now, right?
I am.
Okay, so I think like maybe for like the last, 10 minutes, we'd had a good back and forth with regard to like how to properly, positively interject in a conversation with someone's talking. And then if you look back on that, we could just show like, you don't have to say, can I interrupt you? Can we talk about that first point that you said again? Yeah, I didn't understand that. Explain it again. Can I interrupt you on the second point? Hey, can I express myself, please? Can I talk? Okay, yeah. The third point, I didn't understand that. Can you do it again, please? Or can you explain that? I didn't get it. I disagree with that. Like, you can have, and it's not patronizing. I think you can totally have.
It was really cool. It felt
you
really
can have-
nice. It was like, I'm being like heard. And also kind of like clarified. Like, I like the way Tyrone says it, because it was like what I said, but it just sounds kind of even nicer when he says it. Yeah. I'm kind of getting how I could also with my questioning in SE that it is. I think I've been kind of scared in the beginning that I'm setting people up for something that is not nice for them, because I might be setting them up to be faced with that they have been kind of like had bad logic or been incorrect in something.
Let's get into that.
So I would like to I really appreciate this experience now, because it's kind of showing me that it that might be an irrational, unnecessary fear. She asks herself.
I don't think of maybe my idea of SC is a lot different. Like I said, there's no one way to think about SC. I think of it as a tool to use when I'm already having a conversation with someone.
Yeah.
So I don't think of something as like an SE mode. If you see, I think Anthony Magnabosco is like probably one of the best articulators of SE, and maybe one of the most fundamental practitioners of it. I would say of his style, he has a very much an SE style. Like, he gets into an SE mode, and when he's engaging with someone, he's demonstrating the method as it works. And I feel like from all the videos that I've seen on his YouTube, I don't feel like I have a good idea of how he talks to someone when he's not engaging in SE with him. Because I remember texting him, and I was like, "Hey man, I'm out here with the first time. I got my table," and I showed him a picture of like the table, and he's like, "Fuck yeah, go for it!" I'm like, "Whoa, who is this guy?"
He swears a lot. I've been shocked.
Like the tone is like completely different. I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" I thought he was be like, "Oh, are you in front of a table? What's your method to believe that you're outside doing SE?" So like, he has like a mode that he gets into those conversations in. And I think Read Nice, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's no one way to do SE, but Read Nice Wonder's style, Reed, who has like the video cameras, brilliant setup. His style is much more neutral, like, and I think it's probably better in California because I lived there for a long time. There's some crazy people out there, but people will go out there and be like, "I was abducted by aliens, man. I was abducted by aliens." And anyone who's wrong has 14 aborted fetuses in the brain. I've learned this. I went to college 14 times. I have 14 degrees from Harvard, and he's just like.
This would be me if somebody said that. I'd be like,
right. But his style is like perfect for his environment. But I also don't feel like I understand how he would behave outside of an SE conversation. His mode is neutral. Anthony's mode is very, very cordial, very, very nice. The mode that I'm trying to go for is one where I'm demonstrating that you don't need an SE mode. You can talk to someone, and then you can be like, here's a good moment to like throw in some maybe SE, but I'm not going to like get into the mode. I'm just going to reason out the questions as I'm talking to someone, like in a chatting format. And then when I'm done using that SE questions, I'm back to just talking. And it should be a smooth transition between I'm using SE, I'm not. I'm using it, I'm not. To the point where it's just a blurry kind of like, this is how you can talk to someone and get to their beliefs in a really friendly, laid back kind of a way. And I think the way that you do it is going to be your own way, but there's no one way to do it. And I think that's how I get around the hook of, I feel like I'm starting a conversation out of false pretenses. Like my pretense is this whole thing that I'm having with you right now. So like people who get into it understand from the get-go, this is going to be a friendly thing. We're going to talk about some stuff. And then when we're done in 5 minutes, we're done. And if you want to keep talking, that's totally cool with me too. I hope that explains it. Maybe that's not the best answer to give, but.
No, it's again, crystal clear for me.
Okay. Do you have any questions for me? We could do this again, totally.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go. I gotta go feed my cat too.
Yeah.
Oh, hey! Don't bite. He's not biting. All right.
No, I have no questions to clarify anything that we've spoken of today.
Nothing to clarify.
Really, no.
Let's see.
Because anyway, I can go back and look at it again. And usually I'm better with questions after things have sunk in a bit. But there's nothing like immediate that I'm going like, wait, what did you mean? No.
Okay. I would recommend. There's a guy who's making essay videos. His name is Ben Coates. His name is a lot more complicated than that, but he goes by Ben. I think you've talked to him before and you left a comment on your last video.
Ben Diesel.
Ben Diesel. No, that's not his real name, but he's got a great sense of humor. But yeah, that guy. And something that I really
seeds of thought.
Yes.
Yeah.
Something I really appreciate about him is he is completely willing to break down your interviews in a really constructive but critical format. And he did that since the very first one that I put out. And when I first got it, I was like, finally, some guy out here who's not just liking the video and not leaving any comment, but like the guy is like, Tyrone, here's the things that I think that's maybe something you could work on in the future. And like I hear it, and it's not like aggressive, and he's not coming at me like a terrible person. He's like really interested in making me better. And the only thing that I could do is return the favor. I think between you, me, and him, those are the only guys. And there's a guy named Ben Ritchie as well. He's on Facebook. He hasn't done any SC vids, but he lives very nearby me and he wants to get into it. But we're having like a small coalition of people who are willing to give constructive feedback to one another.
And I'm in that too. I have yet to give you a breakdown, but I am getting to it because I've also not felt that I've had anything really good to write yet. But I'll get to it.
Okay.
You know, like it takes me time to get the kind of courage and to sit down with it and all that. And I am really slow. If I've got a conversation coming up, I kind of like find it hard to focus on other stuff.
I won't say it's a Nordic thing. It's definitely not, because I've met some I've met some Swedish people who are really eager to critique me in a way that I wasn't prepared for. But when I went to Chalmers and I went to Helsinki and I went to Norway a little bit. I forgot where I went in Norway, but I was also in Denmark, in Skagen. There's like a city there. Yeah. I gave talks there, and I noted that when I gave a presentation, like when I gave my practice, we normally have a practice presentation before we give like the full on now, and we're presenting with a bunch of other speakers. But when we do our practice session, we're free to give critiques and feedbacks of what we could change to like modify our talks for the audience that we're speaking to. So when I was in Chalmers and when I was listening to the practice talks, I noticed that whenever I was speaking, everyone just said, yes, very good. And that's it. Oh, hey, good. Oh, yeah. Bra. That's all I say. That's it. Mycket bra. Yeah. But when I give my critique, it's like, you misspelled these things in English. The format of how you would say that is wrong. This graph that you're using doesn't have a citation on it, and it looks like you made it in Paint. I would have a very big critique on things like that, like where'd you get that data from? Where's that substantiated evidence from? And then could you go to like page 4? Like you're showing this molecule and you're like only showing one peak in this chromatogram. That molecule has 2. Like, what is that peak from? And there'll be people in the audience to be like, well, you shouldn't ask that. I'm like, this is a science lecture that we're about to like present. You need to know these things because people are going to hold you to a higher standard. And the best thing I can do for you as your friend is let you know that I'm holding you to a high standard. I'm not going to let you go lower. I'm going to push you higher. And everyone should do that for each other.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. I just haven't been very active with that. Well, I've been active with that with here and there, but not with you yet. Also because you're so incredibly great at what you do. But I do realize that I have that I'm good at other stuff, and just giving feedback, if you sit and think about it, is of course something that can always be valuable. And I come from a background of theatre where the whole basis of doing theatre is giving is feedback. Like you can't do it without giving feedback. So I do get it. I'm going to get into it more. And I absolutely agree with what you just said.
And I think you already have your comfort zone. Like my comfort zone is just having fun conversations with people. I think your comfort zone, in my opinion, is sitting in your kitchen and like having these really delightful conversations with people.
Well, the thing is also that right now it's kind of like a necessity because I want to do this in English for purely selfish reasons at the moment.
Okay.
Because I enjoy talking in English and I don't get the chance to do that too often. Well, now I do all the time because of SE, and that's the whole point for me. I want to do it in English. I do see this as a global kind of opportunity to spread SE in a really delightful way. And so for me to be able to do this in English, it really kind of requires this kitchen to be able to invite people here is my thinking.
Cool.
Although I was invited to this rehearsal. Refugees are rehearsing a play or a short movie in Helsinki.
Cool.
And all of those guys then speak English as their second language, and I was thinking of maybe setting up like SE interviews with them. But yeah, I want to do it in English. I want to do it globally, kind of, is what I'm thinking. My thing. I haven't analyzed that too much yet. Cool.
I look forward to that. Be careful who you invite in your home. Yeah.
Anyway, but I'm thinking like even if I go out of this kitchen, I don't really see myself doing SE in Swedish or Finnish. I don't exactly know why yet.
Okay.
But I'm not motivated to do it in Swedish or Finnish.
Okay. I think you have any option available to you. And it'd be cool, in my personal opinion, to see two people speak in Swedish in SE, because I don't think I've ever seen a video of a non-English SE conversation. Someone who's trilingual, who's like in the place where it happens. That'd be just cool for the sake of showing that it's possible. So feel free to experiment. Like I said, there's no one way to do this. Have fun contributing to this effort.